Happy Thursday. It is Therapy Thursday. Good evening. How are you? How are you? How are you? I am Dr. Triffy. It's another Therapy Thursday, and so you are joining me for Transforming Trauma podcast. Every Thursday, right at this time, I show up to share thoughts and strategies and techniques that are grounded in psychology and sometimes spirituality to explore how we can think better, feel better, and do better. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good evening to you too. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. How are you? Come in, share the live. If you feel like it today, let me know where you're listening to me from. I thought that last week, because we had such a deep and emotionally taxing session on grief and recovering, I would do something lighter tonight. And I want to focus on 3 reasons or 3 times when I think we all need to pay attention. We don't speak about it a lot or enough, I don't think. I'm particularly talking to people who look like me, right? People who look like me. The research shows that we tend to access mental health services less than Caucasian groups. Okay. Some of that is because we have trust issues, to be fair, right? Some of that is because we have trust issues, but also some of that I think is because we are not necessarily always clear on what might need a higher level of attention. So we've become very good, I believe, at treating ourselves and leaning into our communities, leaning into church, leaning into our pastors and our religious people for support. And that's great. Our faith is in the literature highlighted, or spirituality, spiritual beliefs highlighted as one of the major protective factors for people in the African diaspora. Yeah, definitely for African American people. And so tonight, I want to give you 3 experiences, 3 times. When you see this happening, you might want to reach out for support from a mental health professional. Okay, so let me give some descriptions of mental health professionals. Sometimes I think we can feel a little unclear about that. So I'll start with a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor, an MD, who prescribes medication to help manage psychological illness, like depression, like high anxiety, like something like schizophrenia. Okay? All right. Now you have a psychologist. That's what I do. I do not have an MD, I have a PhD. So a psychologist might have a PhD or what's called a PsyD. Okay? And that person is licensed. They're licensed to do evaluations, they're licensed to do psychotherapy. And within that realm, a psychologist might conduct an evaluation and make recommendations for care, recommendations for treatment for you, for your child, for your family, for your relationship. Okay, let's talk about, say, a licensed professional counselor. I also happen to be a licensed professional counselor in Georgia. That's a therapist at the very often at the master's degree level, who's been trained to conduct psychotherapy, also trained to do clinical assessments. So you can go in to that person, and this person's licensed. Most places require a license for you to practice, or the person will be under the supervision of a licensed professional, right? A licensed clinical psychologist or licensed professional counselor as well. And that person can also support you. The person you go to might also be called a licensed clinical social worker. And that person is also trained to do psychotherapy with you, to do evaluations. You come in, they haven't met you yet, but they'll ask you many questions to get an idea of what's going on with you, what's going on with your child, what's going on in your relationship, your family, and make recommendations for treatment on an ongoing basis. Okay, so those are some examples of mental health professionals. And I mentioned people who are licensed because in the US, definitely, you've got to have a license to be able to practice. What a license does for you, the mother or the wife in a relationship who's coming for therapy, what that does for you is that gives you security that this person meets certain criteria, they passed certain exams. That means they understand the information that they'll be offering to you, that they've studied according to certain rules and procedures and regulations, right? So you don't want to just go to anybody who says, yeah, I'm a therapist. I mean, you have every right to do whatever you want, but if you're going to make a choice, choose somebody who is licensed, okay? If you live in a place where licensure is not required, then find out what is required for somebody to meet that criteria in the country that you're living. I'm speaking that way because I know in some Caribbean islands, you don't have to have a license per se to be able to practice. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go straight into it. I want to give you 3 situations where if this is happening with you, your child, your family, your relationship, I think it's time for you to find help. There are a couple that definitely you want to find help. But there's one I want to strongly urge you to find support. So, number 1, suicidal ideation. What is suicidal ideation? If you or somebody you know or somebody you love is having active thoughts of harming themselves, and harming themselves is a gentle way to say it, but literally you having thoughts of killing yourself, ending your life because life has lost meaning for you, because you feel completely overwhelmed, whatever your reason or whatever the person's reason that you might be aware that this person is having this experience, this is the time where you MUST call a mental health professional. Okay? This is not a situation you want to try to manage alone. Now, there are different levels of suicidal thinking. So somebody might be thinking about suicide and they actually know how they're going to do it. They're telling you, well, I made a plan. Yeah. You want to ask them, do you have a plan? It's okay to ask that, because the fact that the person's already thinking about it, you're not the one who's going to be putting the idea in their head. Okay. It doesn't really work that way. So you ask your child, ask your spouse, have you thought about how you would do it? They say yes, that's a clear yes, we're going to the hospital now. Okay, if you live in an area where you can call 911, you call 911 because there are systems that are set up depending on where you live. So if you live in the US, every city has access to 911, right? And every state is going to have a suicide. In Georgia, we have what's called the mobile crisis, right? Where the state has set it up to where there are people who will come out to your home and do an evaluation in your home and help you as the family, together with the people who showed up, the mental health professionals who showed up. They will come, do an assessment, and give you a recommendation as to whether or not you or your child or your family member should go to the hospital right away. Okay? Or if it's okay, if it's safe enough for you to stay home. Sometimes we can not have direct plans to harm ourselves, but we might be in a state where we're feeling like, okay, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm not necessarily going to do something about it. I don't have a plan or a way I'm going to do something about it. But if you're at that level of suffering, you need to call a mental health professional, because more often than not, family members, relatives, loved ones, you're not trained to be able to provide the support for your loved one. Plus, even if you were trained, ethically you couldn't do it. Okay? Ethically, you couldn't, even if you were trained, provide the therapy and the counseling support for your relative. So, what do? Call a mental health professional. And I listed some of the people you could call. So, say you did live in a place where a mobile crisis team could come out to see you, and they decided, well, they think you can stay home. More often than not, they will recommend that you see a therapist in the community. Okay? So you want to go ahead and do that. I know we don't want to see our families suffer. We don't like the idea that they're suffering. Sometimes we procrastinate with these things when they show up in our kids, in our loved ones. I want to encourage you not to procrastinate on that, because that's a matter of life and death. And you would hate, I'm sure, to have worry if you knew you could have done something and you didn't, and say your loved one continues to suffer even more and struggle and just decompensate, get lower and lower and lower and worse and worse and worse and suffer more and more and more and more. Okay? So, suicidal ideation with a plan or without a plan. As long as you hear the idea that the person is saying, I don't want to be here anymore. Sometimes people might do things like, your kids, a lot of teenagers will cut themselves, will hurt themselves, burn themselves. You want to look out for that, because that's a passive, or it's called a para-suicidal act. Okay? It's right up there. And so that's very critical for you as the family member, as the mother, as the father. If you find out your daughter says, yes, my friends were doing it, so I did it too, don't accept that as enough. Call a mental health professional. Okay? All right. So that's suicide. That's the biggie. And all of us, by now, we have to know, if that shows up in me, if it shows up in somebody in my home, my friends, we're calling a mental health professional. We're calling 911. We're calling 1-800-SUICIDE. Okay? We're calling our mobile crisis team if we live in a state where that's accessible and available. If that's not, and all we have is the hospital, we're taking them, we're driving them to the hospital, to the psychiatric unit. Okay? All right. Number two, if you or if somebody you love is saying they've lost the energy to work, or the motivation to work or go to school. If you have a child that starts on Friday night telling you, my stomach hurts, I don't want to go to school, I hate school, I don't like it anymore, call a mental health professional. Why? If you're feeling this way, you want to investigate what else might be happening, because very often when we experience this kind of like drop in energy, loss of interest in things that are valuable to us, your work is valuable to you because that is how you survive. So when you start saying, I don't want to work, that means you don't want to eat. Now, who doesn't want to eat? So that is a signal that there might be something else going on, like major depressive disorder, right? You could be experiencing a depressive episode. You want to call for help, because depression is life-threatening, okay? Untreated depression only escalates, okay? Only escalates. So lost energy, feeling fatigued, you've lost your interest in things that used to bring you pleasure. Definitely you don't want to go to work. Getting up and going to work feels like a horrendous burden. If that's you as an adult, if you have a child who's telling you, I don't want to go to school anymore, school doesn't feel good, maybe your child is being bullied in school. Maybe your child is failing in school. Maybe there's a teacher that's making life very tough for your child. So you call a mental health professional because your child can establish a relationship with that person and start sharing what's really going on behind the scenes that maybe they were not even feeling comfortable enough to share with you. And so together, you can come up with a plan of action, okay, to make things better. The third and final, tonight we are having a short session. The third and final trigger to call a mental health professional is if you are in a committed relationship, you're married, you're engaged, you're in a long-standing relationship, you're in a serious relationship, and you all start fighting. You all start arguing. I'm talking about even verbal, okay, where it seems as if the argument is persistent, it is escalating, it is not getting better. You've tried to work it out and you're stuck. It feels like you're locked in a struggle. Your horns are locked. Call a mental health professional. I am not even going to address if we're fighting to the point of physical, you're hitting me, I'm hitting you. That is clearly a signal that we either don't need to be together or we need mental health support. We need somebody to teach us how to relate, or we do not need to be together. Okay? I need to leave, or you need to leave if we're hitting, slapping, hurting each other. That ought to go without saying in 2023. If you are, say, a victim in a situation like that, if you're when I say victim, I use that word, if you're the one where the other adult is physically hurting you, you need support. You need support. Last year, I did a program with a few survivors, and the strongest theme I heard was women in that situation, men in that situation need support from the people around them who care about them, and they need access to resources. They need resources. So, if you are at the point where there is physical harm, you definitely need help. You definitely need to call a mental health professional. There are many shelters. If you live in the US, Canada, Britain, there are many safe houses for you. There are many support services available to you. There are places where you can go and the kids can go with you. Okay? If you're afraid of leaving your children behind. I want to talk about if there's no physical violence, but you are locked like this. So here's the thing. Some relationship theorists believe that every relationship is going to cycle. It's going to work like a spiral. And I want to talk to you tonight about a model by a gentleman called Harville Hendrix. And I've spoken about this before, but I want to talk about it a little bit tonight. How do you create a partnership that is conscious, where you're clear-minded about it, and that when these struggles come to you, you know what to do. I'm suggesting again that when you get to that point, you call a mental health professional so they can help you understand what's happening potentially in the relationship. So Harville Hendrix and Helen Hunt, his wife, I believe, they created this model of looking at relationships. And so they suggest that, yes, you meet someone, and in the beginning, you have romantic love. You have this, I can't live without you. You're the best thing since sliced bread. Everything I've been looking for, you're it, minus a couple things, you know? And that lasts for a while. Everybody's process is different. Your chemistry with people is different. So you don't know, with one person, it might take a little longer before you hit a stage that's called the power struggle stage. And that stage is triggered by unconscious ways of being. Stuff that's hooked very often for us in our childhood. Stuff that's based on needs we had in childhood, challenges we faced in childhood that we've either not yet fully resolved or we haven't learned skills to communicate that well enough to the other person. So when we start communicating, once that romantic love, once the love drugs, the buzz starts fading, then these things, these unconscious patterns start bubbling to the surface. And if, say, as a child, I felt like people were being too much, say, in my business, they were too intrusive, they didn't give me any space, that might become an issue for me in a relationship if I have a partner who seems to be wanting to know where I am, when I am coming home, what I'm doing. They're always right next to me. If I'm a person who might feel like, oh, this is how my parents were. This is how my family was. This is how my community was. And I want it to feel a little different. I want my freedom. I want to be with you, but I also want my freedom and my space. So if you're not aware of that, like I said, many of these patterns are unconscious. They're at a place where we don't pay much attention to them, but they're going to get triggered in a relationship. They just are. Okay? When that starts to show up in power struggles, you're like, I want it my way, you want it your way. Why do you not want me to be all over you? I just care about you. Why do you not want me to know where you are? You must be doing something horrible because maybe that other person, their unmet need, right? Or their challenge was people were very detached from them. And so they come into the relationship now with you and they want to feel close. They want to feel connected to you. And there you are. Your challenge might have been that people were too all over you. And so once the buzz of the relationship, of the romantic flooding that happens on the onset starts to wear off, those things are going to show up. And we start arguing, we start fighting, we start disagreeing, can't resolve it. Call a mental health professional before you surrender your relationship. If there's no physical abuse, if there's no egregious, immoral, just unnecessary, yucky things happening, before you surrender the relationship and before you allow it to become more toxic, call a mental health professional. Because what did I just say? We study these things. So many of us have learned how to teach you to navigate that stage of a relationship. So would you prefer to lose everything you've invested so far in a relationship with a person that you see yourself with for the rest of your life because a natural part of a relationship cycle has shown itself? No, no. And many people give up at that stage. Many people give up. If they've, God forbid, gotten married and that shows up, some of them might go to becoming roommates, where you're so mad, you stop talking. You can be over there. I can be over there. I'm not dealing with this. We're not dealing with this. I'm not dealing with this is probably a way you learn to deal with stress in childhood. Because adults deal with this. Adults deal with problems. Why? Because adults learn, and if they don't know, they go find out how to solve problems. Okay? So, if you are at that stage in a relationship, in your relationship, or if you see somebody you really care about and their relationship is going through it and they haven't considered calling a mental health professional yet, please encourage them. Please encourage your mate by telling your mate that the people who study these things say that every relationship is going to go through this spiral, this cycle that starts with romantic love, but then moves to a phase of power struggle, where again, many of us, because it's very uncomfortable, we want to bail out and we think we are not in love anymore. The thing is, in a way, you aren't, because you weren't upfront. Yeah, the initial rush of biology and hormones, that wasn't love yet, according to this model, because it is after you decide to sit with the power struggle, see what is happening here, explore it, potentially get some outside help and support. Then you learn the skills. After you make a decision to recommit to your partner. That's what I meant a little earlier when I said some people choose to bail out. They're like, this is not for me. I don't want to do this. And we live in a time where I think we have so many more options just because we have these things, we have these phones. And so we say, well, I can just go swipe right. Yes, I can go swipe right, but what is the quality of what I'm getting at the swipe writing business, right? Or am I not going to have to go through the same cycle if, say, I match with someone on this phone? Is there some benefit to staying in the struggle, staying in the romantic struggle, the relationship struggle, making a recommitment, which is what they suggest, a recommitment where you say, okay, we're going to try. I'm going to try. Let's figure this out. Let's see what is it that we could do in a different way to serve the relationship better. Because clearly I was all over you last year, 2 months ago. Okay. The next stage in that spiral is becoming relationally competent. And you can become relationally competent. Okay, let's be honest. Many of us grew up in families where communication was not a priority. Communicating well, expressing your thoughts, expressing your feelings was not a big deal. People told you to shut up. People were yelling and screaming when they were irritated. That doesn't work well in relationships. It might work well in your family where you were doing it and getting away with it, but no, that's not going to work well in a relationship. So you want to learn the skills. Now, how will you learn the skills if you don't get some help or go read a book or attend a workshop? How will you get it? By osmosis? No. So the adult in you must show up, as I often say, to rescue the child in you that shows up after the biological hormones wane and your unconscious patterns you learned in childhood show up. Your adult must make a recommitment to that person that you committed to in step 1 up there. And you learn skills and you practice ways to do it now in a way that is compatible with your person. Okay? You learn what your person needs more of and less of. So the partner who wanted to be, I just want to be all up under you. I just want to feel connected. That's how I feel connected. Meanwhile, you're saying, no, I get that. I want to feel connected to you too, because I was feeling connected to you in the romantic love piece. But could you do it in a different way where you're not calling me 20 times a day with a certain tone? I would prefer it if you did call me, that you're texting or you're calling to, just to say hi versus where are you? That feels different for me. So you see, we start talking, we start communicating, we start explaining ourselves to each other. We start teaching the other person who we are, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, so that the relationship can become more mature, more stable, more grounded. It is after we learn these skills, remember, we've recommitted to the relationship. It's after we learn these skills that we can start to reconnect in a healthier way, in an even more committed way, in an adult way. And that couple, Harville Hendrix and his wife, they suggest that's when you come and the circle becomes complete, to know you can say, yeah, this is real love. Because what we start off with is chemistry. We start off with is, I like your smile. I like how you look. Or, I love the way you buy me gifts. You're a great provider. That's what we start off with. But there is the fight. I mean, think about it. You connect two souls, two human beings with two completely different upbringings and sets of experiences. In that shaping and that molding of the third thing, which is the relationship. There's you, there's me, and there's us, right? So us, that's the relationship. That's a new entity. So anytime you're creating any new thing, you're shaping any new thing, you look at a sculptor, it starts with a block of stone with no shape, no form. Just knows, oh, I love this stone. Man, this is the stone right here, right? Or a canvas. This, you have these ideas, but you start shaping it. A person who does woodwork starts with a block of wood, and then they shape it. But in the shaping, you have to cut pieces off, right? You have to shave pieces, parts break off. Breaking and shaving and cutting suggests pain, right? It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to hurt. But if you have the correct tools, a la sculptor, a la painter, if you make a mistake, you know how to smooth it up, how to round it off, how to get your, you see the artists with their whatever's rubbing off whatever, right? To shape it. But if you bail out too soon, I think many of us have bailed out very soon before putting in the time, investing in the relationship, investing in ourselves too, because if you started and you made a commitment, you've already poured so much of yourself into that union. I think it's worth putting in the time to learn how to do it well and learn how to do it better. So you give yourself the opportunity to create real love along that couple's journey. So I wanted to talk about that one in particular because I think many of us are put off looking for mental health support when our relationships are falling apart. But I am here to tell you tonight that every relationship is going to go through these phases, according to Mr. Hendrix, okay? And you can tell me in the chat if you agree with him or not. You can tell me if you agree, if you've had that experience in your relationships where, man, you all started off like this, and out of the blue, you all started just arguing, and some of you made it, and some of you didn't make it. So I want to encourage you tonight to access take advantage of mental health support services. You might need medication support. You need a psychiatrist. You might need a psychological evaluation for your child who's not learning well enough, who's not on target, who is, many of us have kids who are on the autism spectrum disorder where, they're growing, physically, but they seem to be learning in a different way, or they're interacting with us in different ways. They're not looking at us when they're speaking. They're having difficulty socializing and reciprocating with us socially. And some of us want to deal with it alone, but you don't have to. And there are people who that's what they do. Okay? Call a therapist so you can talk about areas in your life that don't seem to be working or you wish were working better. If you want to sharpen yourself, yeah, I didn't include that on the list. But if you want to exceed your status, your standards, what you're creating, you want to sharpen your goal setting skills, you want to create more in life, you want to succeed more in life, call a therapist. Okay, call a therapist, invest some money into yourself, and see what therapy can do for you. Okay, so this is my offering for you tonight. 3 situations where you want to call a mental health professional: suicidal thinking or suicidal behaviors. Number 2, if you've lost energy for work, because work is where we get our money, aka our food or electricity, right? Or groceries or bills. So if I've lost the energy to work, this is not a hopeful situation. It's going downhill from there. If my child has lost their interest in school, if my child does not want to go to school anymore, I need to find out what's going on. And sometimes your kid will not tell you for many reasons, but they'll tell a trained professional. Okay? And then the last one is if you find yourself arguing in your relationship, and this is not a common thing. The thing is, it's not going to be common. There's going to be a point in every relationship where it was not common for you to be arguing. Why? Because when we meet each other, we don't start off arguing. We don't start off arguing. When that starts to happen, there are some things going on beneath the surface of the relationship that are unconscious that you want to find out, because it happens like that for every relationship. The next person you go to, you're going to come to that cycle. You're going to come to that stage in the cycle of love. Okay? All right. I will see you all next Thursday. I hope you have a lovely Thursday. Princess Jen says, great topic and informative. Thank you, Princess Jen. Princess Jen says, sends me 4 stars. Thank you. Thank you. Facebook user is in Dominica, the Commonwealth of Dominica, not to be confused with the Dominican Republic. I am from Dominica myself. We are further south. We're between Guadeloupe and Martinique. Okay? We love them. We love the Dominican Republic. They speak Spanish. We speak English. We are further south. We speak English and a French Creole. Somebody else says, good evening. Happy Thursday to you too. All right, y'all. I hope you all have a lovely, lovely rest of your evening. You are so worthy of creating a good life and living a good life that feels good for you, feels good to you, and equips you with tools where I can create a certain environment in my home, in my relationships, right? If I learn the tools. So if you think you could stand to learn the tools, call a professional. Okay? All right. Have a lovely night. See you next Thursday.